think domestic violence is any type of physical, mental, emotional, any type of abuse whatsoever in any sort of domestic relationship, family, couple, spouse.
Abuse, I define that as physical abuse, so like biting, hitting, scratching, pushing, that type of stuff. Like any type of beat down, I would think is is physical abuse. In terms of mental and verbal abuse, I'd say just like any type of degrading speech, stuff like
My
that.
definition of domestic violence would probably be abuse and aggression towards your significant other in the form of physical violence and probably even some emotional torment and violence.
I think the abusee doesn't leave the abuser for a number of reasons. If the abusee has children or some type of responsibility with the abuser, that's probably one reason. Like most people would say that they don't want to leave for the children, and also I think it's a lack of self-esteem that person might have, that they think they will never be wanted by anybody else. And I think the psychological games the abuser plays with the abusee accounts for that.
It's probably the learned helplessness psychology behind it, where you are constantly yo-yo between wanting to leave them, not being able to leave them, them being mean to you, and then begging for you back. People just kind of learn to stay stuck in a situation and don't know when to walk away when they think they really care about somebody, and when that person they care about has control over them and threatens their lives.
I think it's based on embarrassment and fear and shame, and I think that both our society, our culture, our government really makes it difficult for people to come forward. A lot of times things go to court and they're not resolved. People are afraid that people are going to think it's their fault or that it's something to be embarrassed about, and specifically in domestic violence situations, I think people just become so attached. It's sort of like this crazy mental thing where you're like afraid of the person, but you're also attached to the person because they abuse you, and it just becomes this like vicious cycle that you kind of, it's a lot harder to get out of, I think, than people think it is.
I would say that it depends on the individual. I think that obviously if abuse is something that runs in the family, and a child sees, let's say, a child sees their mother or father getting abused in some situation, it depends on what the child takes away from it. So they either learn to do the same for whatever circumstance, or they learn that it's wrong and how much it can hurt people.
I wouldn't say less likely to be violent. I would probably say more likely to be violent. I think that the way you're raised shows a pretty good example of the way that you're going to act when you're older. I think a lot of people that don't deal with issues coming out of domestic violence, physical abuse households, if those issues don't get dealt with, that they'll definitely come back and manifest themselves later. And I know a lot of the time people do to others what has been done to them.
I think somebody raised in an abuse household is definitely more likely to become an abuser or become an abusee. I think naturally people replicate what they had in their childhood homes when they get older. So I think even if they wouldn't want to, they would end up dealing with their anger and frustrations in the same way that they saw their parents handling their anger and frustrations, which could be physical or mental abuse.
Everybody, who has been a victim of any type of abuse has the courage to come forward and let everybody know who's done what.